Hey guys, welcome back to another art doll video. So this one is the Veiled Chameleon. So a new little doll that is currently available in my shop. Real labour of love, this doll, but I think it turned out really nice. It's roughly life-sized, maybe a tad bigger than life-sized, but roughly life-sized. Really happy with the way this turned out. So he has a polymer clay head. So I've sculpted the head. The eyes are slightly off center, so one's looking one way, one's looking the other. Wanted to capture that little detail. It's still got glass eyes inside as well. I've hand painted them. The little spines are all hand sculpted as well, and they're nice and secure on there as far as I can tell. The body is a fabric which I have done all this scale texturing to, so that took about 10 hours to do this skin, just for the skin. Which I have painted with acrylic paints, but yeah, it feels really nice, to be honest. I will do another chameleon, I'm just not sure when. It will be a 3-horned chameleon this time, as opposed to this one being the Veiled Chameleon. So I went for the yellow striping with this one as well, so a couple of different patterns. I might go a bit more radical with the next color, but I wanted to keep this one mostly green anyway. Nice lime teal color as well. So, and it has a plastic ball and socket armature inside, so it is fully posable. The hands are also really slightly posable, just for a little bit of movement, added movement, I guess. The nails are latex. I am going to put, I tried the UV resin, no go with that one. Don't like how it works. It sort of, it comes off the latex, so it doesn't really stick very well. So I'm going to try a different sort of glue to just solid them up a bit. I did originally sculpt them at translucent Sculpey, but way too fragile. And I don't want to send a doll off that is gonna break, basically. Again, the tail is also posable. I did sew this in place. I thought it looked a bit more realistic. The armature is too thick to get to this tiny little section, so I sewed this in place, but then you can, you know, curl it further if you want with the armature. So I think it just made it a bit more realistic than just a straight tail, I should say. So yeah, and acrylic paint, I think I said that. So this little one is a real labour of love. It looks real. It looks like a real chameleon. I'm really happy with it. So there's definitely more reptiles on the horizon. But yeah, if you want to know how I made him, then keep watching. And if you're interested in purchasing, head to my store, creaturesandnet.com. Shoot me a message if you need a payment plan. I'm super flexible with it. So yeah, just feel free to let me know. So yeah, keep watching if you want to know how I made him. Alright, so I'm starting off with painting up some glass capuchon eyes, and because the chameleon eyes are a bit weird, they're mostly covered in scales, but the little small bit in the center is obviously an eye. So I decided to paint up some really tiny little eyes with some acrylic paints, let it dry overnight, and I can start the sculpting. And I start off with a aluminium foil core, and that basically acts as a skull, and then I'm going to be covering it in polymer clay. So my polymer clay of choice is Sculpey Original. It's the softer Sculpey. I like working with soft clays, so I conditioned a whole bunch of it. I'm trying to keep this doll quite small, so it's roughly life-sized, which chameleons aren't very big anyway, so this is on the smaller side of an art doll, so I've done really well keeping it a small size. Okay, so covering the foil core with a really thin layer to begin with, and then I can start blocking out some of the detail work. So I have shaped the aluminium foil core into roughly the shape of the head. It always helps with sculpting the right shape. So I'm just mapping out where I want the skull to basically, the way that you want it to look. And then I can start, blocking out all the details of where I want the features to go. So I'm going to start mapping out those sharp ridges on top of the head and also where I want the mouth to go. So the mouth has like a little bit of an overbite as well, just a slight one. So yeah, I'm just really roughing the shape out and sort of starting to get those contours right. So I'm working on the lower part of the head here, so basically like the little flappy thing under the chin and where I want the mouth to sit. So the edge of the mouth goes in a downward direction as well, so I just mapped that out with a thin piece of clay which I've blended into the head, and I can start working on the top of the head. I've also sort of mapped out where roughly the eyes are going to sit as well, and I can start building up on all those features. Okay, so once I'm quite happy with the way this is looking, I can start building up a little bit more detail, really slight detail work, not the finer details. So just carving out some little sections that have little concave bits, mapping out the eyes and doing a little bit more work on the mouth area and just sharpening some of these edges as well. So I was toying around with the idea of using movable eyes, but I think I might try that in the next chameleon that I make. So I basically created really deep eye wells at where I want the little eyes to sit. I ended up doing solid eyes anyways, but the eye wells, what I basically did was create the eye well, roll a ball that will house the little capuchon for the eye, and I can just pop it in there and build up the detail on that. So once I'm happy with the way the eyes are sitting, I'm going to pop in the pupil, the little capuchon for the eyes, and I'm going to do it slightly off center. So obviously a fun fact with chameleons is they can move their eyes in different directions. So I sort of put them off in a different direction, not straight. So just to show off that little feature. And then I'm just going to go around the edge with a thin bead of clay just to blend it in and hold it securely in place, and I can start adding some more little details. Alright, so as I was in two minds about doing a veiled chameleon or a three-horned chameleon, but I chose to go with the veiled chameleon. So basically what I'm doing is his crest here. I've rolled out a piece of clay and shaped it into a rough shape of what I want the crest to look like. And then I can place it on top of the head and start blending it in, removing any clay that I think needs to be removed because it's a bit overhanging the edge there. So I'm just going to probably cut it off with a little scalpel that I use and just start blending the veil into the rest of the head. For the nostrils, I like to use a small ball tool. I basically use that for every single nostril, unless it's like a straight line. I basically use a ball tool for every nostril that I make. It's really handy. I have a whole lot of different sizes, and I basically just push it into the clay, and I can sort of lift little areas up and around that create like a little nostril. So yeah, get yourself a ball tool. Alright, so now I'm going to start just creating those little flaps of skin that you can see on the eyeballs. So I'm using a little spoon sort of tool. It's a sculpting tool, but with a really small flat spoon on the end of it. This is really handy for sculpting details like this that are on a curve, because the curved bit sort of sits against the curve of your sculpture, and you can sort of just press in and push back on the clay to create a little flap of skin. Alright, so I'm sort of just mapping out where I want the scales to sit and what direction, and then I can start adding those finer details. So there's a little handy tip just to score your reptile skin with the rough direction of how you want the scales to go, and it's an easy way to follow a pattern. Alright, so for the scale work, there's no real easy way to do scale work. It's really time consuming. It's why I have done a lot of reptiles. But basically for this one, what I'm doing is using a piece of really sort of thin plastic, not too thin, but not too thick, and just basically scouring the detail of the scales in the clay. So the reason why I use the plastic is it acts as a little bit of a barrier, and it doesn't scrape at the clay, but rather than makes a sort of a dent or an indentation of the scale work. So if you use a straight pointy tool, it just basically creates a scratch in the clay, and it doesn't look very realistic. So by putting a piece of plastic over the top, you can get a bit of a softer scale look. And after many hours of scale work, I can finally bake this and also sculpt a little bit of the feet, but I'll get into a bit more detail when I get to that part. Alright, so for the feet, I had a bright idea of making them posable just to create a little bit more work for myself. So basically I'm just sculpting the ends of the feet. So I've got a small bit of clay, and on the one side of the chameleon's feet is 3 toes, and on the other side is 2 toes. So basically I cut out a couple of toes on either side. It's all the same for each toe. And whether it's 2 or 3, and just basically round them out and stick them back together. I originally sculpted these to have polymer clay claws, but I didn't like how fragile they were, so I ended up removing them and using some latex instead, so they're way more durable and I don't have a chance of snapping. So basically cut out a rough shape. I also used a little tool to create a nail bed, which I ended up obviously just taking off anyway. But it also worked well for having a little slot to insert the latex in. So once these are all baked, yay, I can start painting. So the paintwork is a pretty elaborate job for this one. So I wasn't really sure the pattern that I was going to go for. I was just sort of winging it. But mostly I wanted a lime and teal colour with a little bit of yellow. So that's basically what we went for. I know I wanted the yellow striping on the body. But I just sort of went with the flow with this one. I just felt like, did what I thought looked good. I'm using a bunch of different water-based acrylic paints, some by Armature, some by Derivian Matisse. This lime one was probably the majority of what I use, and then also a teal colour. So this lime one is actually quite a translucent paint, so I had to do a couple of layers of this one just to get the coverage, but all the other paints were quite good. And then I've just mapped out where I want that lime to go, and then mapping out where I want this teal colour to go, and then I can blend it in a bit better. And then I can go ahead and add the other colours. So I'm doing a little bit of raw sienna colour on the ridges of the crest, and also around the eyebrows, let's call them, just to give it a little bit of colour. And then I decided to add a little bit more within the head itself, just like little areas, little patches, and also wanted to add the striping along the eyes as well, just in that sienna colour. So I needed to do quite a number of layers of paint in this one just to get the vibrancy of the paints through, especially when you're doing it on white. Sometimes white shows through a little bit, so yeah, a couple of layers of paint just to bring out that vibrancy. Okay, so moving on to the armature. So I'm using a smaller size ball and socket armature. I think it's a 1/8 size ball and socket armature. I've also added a joint on the hands so they are slightly posable. And then I can pop the armature together using my pliers. I've got a rough image on my computer just to make sure I've got all the dimensions right and length on everything right. Yeah, it's really simple, easy way. I have these armatures in my shop. If you're interested, I'm plumb out of the pliers though, apart from the largest size. But yeah, I really like using these armatures. And once everything's been popped together and I'm happy with the way it's all looking, I can start adding the polyfill. So basically what I do is cover the armature in a pipe cleaner, and the fluffiness sort of catches the polyfill that I'm going to use for the needle felting. And it doesn't affect the posability in any way. It doesn't provide any further strength either, because pipe cleaners are quite bendy and just a really thin piece of wire. So I'm just going to cover it and in a layer just to wrap it around, because it's a bit slippery when I don't have that fluffiness to catch the polyfill. And then I can start needle felting the body. So because this is a smaller doll, the needle felting isn't going to take too long, and the doll is quite thin too. So just got to keep poking away until I achieve a muscle tone that I'm happy with, and then I can start adding the fabric over the top. So for this one, because I'm using a cotton fabric and it's quite flat, I need to make sure the needle felting is quite smooth and all the contours are right. So a little bit more poking this time just to make sure it's all nice and smooth and ready to be covered. So basically just cover the armature entirely until I have reached all the parts that are going to have some needle felting on them. So the legs are quite thin, so I've kept the polyfill needle felt to a really thin piece of polyfill just to bulk it out and cover the armature. And then also around the spine, and I'm just going to bulk out the belly basically, and then I'm not going to do the tail because the tails are quite thin, so I'm going to have to hand sew that and do it all manually when I get to that point. Alright, so once I am happy with the way the body is looking, I'm going to move on to starting to sew up the fabric. So the fabric, I had an idea of using some heat color changing fabric, but it didn't really work out. It's not the color that I wanted it. So I decided to use the fabric anyway. I've got it, I'm going to use it anyway. It's just like a cotton fabric, which I am roughly cutting out around the torso piece, which I can then sort of trim off the excess and sew it up using a ladder stitch. It's always difficult to sew up bodies with a flat fabric rather than faux fur. So you've got to be really neat with the stitching and all of the seam lines as well. So I'm going to be really careful and do my stitches really close with this one. Okay, so I'm just pinning all of the fabric against the form that I needle felted and trimming that excess off. So I'm using a ladder stitch to sew this up, and it is a stitch that sort of is a little bit of a blind stitch, but because, like I said before, it is a flatter cotton fabric, the stitches have to be really close together and really quite small to hide that seam line. So inevitably you're gonna find seam lines in dolls that are sewn like this, but I tried really hard to hide them, and I think they're quite difficult to find. Anyway, it's I've sort of hid them when I did the scale work, but I'll show you a little bit later on in the video. Okay, so I'm going to sew up the leg areas and also the tail area. For the tail, I'm going to leave a little bit of the end with no armature inside so I can curl it over on itself. The armature is too thick to put it all the way through, and it doesn't curl around on itself the way I want it to, so I'm going to leave it a little bit flat and then sew it together once I've applied everything. So once it's all sewn up, I can move on to gluing everything. So I'm using a tacky fabric glue to glue the fabric to the polymer clay, and I'm trying to be neat on this one because it's going to be visible. There's no faux fur to hide the glue or seam lines or anything like that. So I'm just going in with my little needle tool to spread that glue around and let it dry and adhere overnight. And for the little ridge on top of the chameleon, so the top of along the spine, let's call it, it goes into a little bit of a taper. So I'm just sewing this little taper in, pinned it together, and I'm just going to do a little running stitch to hold it in place to get that taper. Okay, so for the little spine things, let's call it, I individually sculpted these. I can see I have a whole lot of them in the tray. This is going to go along the underbelly and chin bit, and also along the top of the spine. So I've used yellow Fimo, I think it was, or it could have been Sculpting 3, something like that, but it's polymer clay, how about that? And yeah, I've rolled out all these tiny little spines, which I am then gluing it on. For the fabric, I am using the same fabric glue. It adheres really well, but for the polymer clay, I did use this, but I wasn't really happy with the way it was sticking, so I ended up changing the glue to use super glue, and it adheres really well, polymer clay to polymer clay with super glue. But yeah, the fabric, I used a fabric glue. And now for the scales. So my bright idea was to do every scale individually. So I did a lot of testing on what would work best for the scale work. I might do a video over on my Patreon going into a little bit more detail on how I did these scales. I think I've recorded one. So yeah, I might post something over there, and yeah, you can get a bit more in-depth video on how I did the scale work. But anyway, I did mix a couple of mediums together, Mod Podge and acrylic medium, and just did a few tests, patches on some scrap bit of fabric, and I really liked the way it worked out. So there was like a bit of a happy medium between it being stretchy and crumbly. So, and again, I might do a video over my Patreon on a bit more detail on how I did these scales, but it feels really nice. I did the whole body in these scales, and just to torture myself some more, I'm going to do a Gila Monster, which has the same sort of scale pattern to it. So all up, the skin alone for this chameleon took 10 hours. That's the sewing, the scale work, and the painting all took 10 hours to do. So it's quite a bit of labor intensive work with the scales, but I think the texture and the extra detail really paid off, and it looks really, really good. Okay, so once that is dry, I did the whole thing and tried to cover up the seam lines with these spots as well, and I think I covered the seams quite well. So I sort of went along the seam first and then just built the rest of the scale work on that. So it's time for the painting. So I was sort of didn't really have a solid plan on the colorway of this chameleon, but I did know I wanted to do yellow stripes down the middle. So I started off with the yellow stripes, just going over. I did a couple of coats of this yellow with a couple of different colours of yellow just to give it some depth as well. So I'm using some acrylic paints here. I've watered it down. The first layer has been watered down, so the paint will soak into the fabric rather than just sit on top. And then I go over it with a bit more of a thicker paint to get that vibrant color. So I'm then going in with a raw sienna color just to bring out some more pattern work along those yellow stripes. And then I'm going to go in with some of the teal colour. So this is a Drury Matisse colour, aqua green I think it's called, but it's a really nice teal colour, and I also use this to do fake verdigris. So I'm going in with this colour first, and then I'll go in with that lime colour just to bring a bit more colour and depth into the body. I wasn't sure again which way the pattern work was going. I was looking at a couple of different reference images, but if I do another chameleon, which will be a 3-horned chameleon, I might go for a bit more of a vibrant pattern work into it rather than mostly green. So I'm going to do the entire body with the teal first, sort of tapering it off from the underbelly. So the underbelly would be a bit more lime and the top is a bit more teal, and just a little bit of striping through the legs. For underneath the claws, I'm going to do the raw sienna colour just to change it up a little bit. So yeah, a little bit of the raw sienna colour on the paws, and I'll sort of blend it up a little bit once I've put the lime on. And for the lime, moving on to the lime is a bit transparent, so I needed to do a bit of a thicker layer, make sure it's really soaked into the fabric. So majority of this doll is this lime colour, so this one's probably the bigger task, the paint job. And I decided to put a little bit of a striping through this little, ridge next to the top. So I started off with the yellow, and then I'm going to add a little bit of brown. I think it was a burnt umber or something. A little bit of brown to it to create a little bit of patterning work. And I'm also going to add a little bit of yellow spots on the underbelly area, which I'm going to highlight with that same brown. And I can go ahead and start filling in the gaps of green up the top. So there's mostly teal, remember? So I'm going to go in and fill in those gaps with the lime. Okay, so for the spots, again, I'm going in with that darker brown colour and just highlighting some of those yellow spots down the bottom on the underbelly, just to give it a little bit more detail. And then I decided to add a couple of teal spots on those yellow stripings, just again for some more detail. And I think it looks really good. It blends it in a bit better, I think. Alright, so that pretty much finishes off the whole entire chameleon. I went over the nails with a little bit of Alma's glue just to make it a bit more solid, but they are very flexible, and like I said, the last thing I wanted to do was to curl that little tail over, so I did a little stitch to hold the curl in place, but I think it's really realistic. The rest of the tail is posable. So this guy is available in my shop, creaturesandnet.com. Check it out. I have a payment plans also available. Try and make it really flexible so people have access to my dolls a bit easier. So just shoot me a message if you're interested in something like that. But you can find me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Just not X, because I deleted the account off there. Anyway, so yeah, check me out in there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps my channel grow, and also sharing my videos helps me a lot. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, leave me some comments below, and any dolls that you want me to make, leave me some suggestions as well, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.